Most of us dread to hear the word discipline. It kind of conjures up images of restriction. It limits our behavior and creates a narrow lifestyle. Even if it comes from God, we still cringe at its mention. What's worse, the author of today's Hebrew pericope pulls no punches, and he puts it this way, speaking to the people in his community, wanting to draw them back into the responsibility that is theirs as children of God. My child, do not disdain the discipline of the Lord, or lose heart when reproved by him. For whom the Lord loves, he disciplines. He scourges every child he acknowledges. Kind of reminds me of a text, famous text, probably for many of you too, of St. Teresa of Avila. Speaking to God, she says, if this is how you treat your friends, it's no wonder you have so many enemies. We have enough problems with human discipline. We certainly don't need God kind of stepping into the same picture. We like him to embrace us and welcome us, but to chastise us and call us back to task is something that is just as challenging as so many other disciplines. But God's biblical discipline is a unique process, and this is something that we often forget in our talking about God, that it's unique, it's different, it doesn't apply really. None of our words apply to God because he's God and we are totally other than he is, or he is totally other than everything. And so we often forget to think that what we are saying is something that has to be thought through in a different kind of way. Contrary to most human conditioning, the discipline of God prepares us to habitually open up. It is not constricting. It is an opening process. And it prepares us to shed the limits which restrict most people's thoughts and behavior. We clearly see this new type of freeing up discipline in our other two readings. And the first, of course, is the third Isaiah. And Isaiah had given himself as a major task to get the people of Israel to come back from Babylon, where they had been in captivity for so long. And then when the Persians conquered the Babylonians, they were called the Persians said to the Israelites, you want to go home, go home. But they had been there so long, they had taken in so many roots, they were so comfortable, and things in Jerusalem were not very pretty. The whole city was in ruins and it needed to be rebuilt. And they weren't really very interested in going back and spending the rest of their lives building the city. But they are being called to task by Yahweh. And Yahweh, when he speaks to the disciplined ones, he always wants to break through their narrow-mindedness and look at the world as God looks at it. He's inviting them into a new world, actually, when he's inviting them to Jerusalem. He's not calling them to come back to the same old, same old. He's calling them to come back to a world in which the non-Jews and Gentiles are being called in to be a part of that city, a part of that reality. And he says, and God puts in his words, I come to gather nations of every language. They shall come and see my glory. I will set a sign among them. That sign, of course, is the newly built Jerusalem. But for that event to happen, the Gentiles have to have this kind of special attraction, which is Jerusalem. And that is the work of the people of God, to build up the kingdom in order to be able to draw people into that kingdom. Yahweh's people and Yahweh's city will be a sign of Yahweh's global plan for the salvation of non-Jews. God's disciples must always be trained to think big, real big. When we turn to the Gospel of Luke that we read today, we see a similar kind of presence of Christ working from the same frame of mind when he encourages his followers to enter through the narrow gate. It's ironic for Jesus and his disciples, his followers, his imitators. The narrow gate is always the gate of broad-mindedness. When someone asks him about the number of people who will be saved, Jesus answers with a statement about the kind of people that are going to be saved. And obviously among them are the good people. And some of these people have been thinking that it only takes a kind of a certain sort of discipline of their own that will lead them and make them ready to be members of the kingdom. People will come from the east and the west and from the north and the south and will recline at table in the kingdom of God. A lot of those who think they have it made because they're members of the tribe, however, will find that they are not being welcomed into the kingdom. This is not a total reversal. That is to say, if you've been in the kingdom and you've been following it and following the rules, you're going to be out, obviously, but not. It is a kind of a warning to those who find themselves established and comfortable and wanting to be in a place that God doesn't call for them to be different. And oftentimes the call of God is always something different, something renewed, something having to be rebuilt, something having to be remade. And in that, Jesus, God, Yahweh, Jesus, are inviting us to be creators and makers of the world, of revisioning the world through God's eyes. And we've often heard this, that we try to see the world through God's eyes. We know that we don't understand it, and yet it is always there and inviting us and calling on us and reminding us that there is something new to be made in the world around us in order to make it indeed the better world that we so long for. Perhaps the best way to discipline ourselves according to God's method is to constantly remind ourselves of Jesus' last statement in today's reading. Behold, some are last who will be first, and some are first who will be last. It's an exceptional, no holds barred way of looking at reality. We're invited to see it through the eyes of God. Let us ask God that we may be able to come up to the task, to step up to the task that we are being called to.